To our amazing viewers at Cheating Tales Lab, we'd love to hear, which part of the world are you joining us from? Let us know. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Soldier's Peace. Truman Pittman had learned to read people in Fallujah, where a misread expression could mean the difference between coming home and coming home in a box. 15 years after hanging up his Marine uniform, that skill hadn't dulled, it had sharpened. These days, he used it to spot lies across boardroom tables instead of IEDs across dusty streets. As a senior investigator for a private security firm, he'd built a reputation for being thorough, relentless, and impossibly difficult to deceive. His daughter, 16-year-old Maya Pittman, had inherited his observational skills, though she wielded them with teenage precision against homework excuses and her father's attempts at being cool. Their house in the quiet suburb of Riverside Oaks was his sanctuary, a far cry from the chaos of his past life. His wife, Jennifer, had passed 3 years ago from cancer, leaving him to navigate single fatherhood with the same determination he'd once applied to combat missions. It was a Thursday afternoon in late September when Joanne West, their neighbor from 2 doors down, knocked on their door. She was a paralegal at a downtown firm, a divorced mother struggling to make ends meet. Truman had helped her fix her fence last summer and occasionally loaned her tools. "Truman, I'm so sorry to ask," Joanne said, her expression harried. "My sitter canceled last minute, and I have a deposition I absolutely cannot miss. Could you possibly watch Cooper for a few hours? I know it's sudden." Cooper, her 2-year-old son, was a quiet kid. Too quiet, Truman had always thought, but he'd chalked it up to shyness. "Of course," Truman said. "Bring him over. Maya's home, so he'll have entertainment." "You're a lifesaver." Joanne's relief was palpable. She returned 5 minutes later with Cooper, a diaper bag, and a list of instructions delivered at rapid-fire speed. The toddler clung to his mother's leg, his wide eyes watching Truman with something that looked like wariness. As Joanne's car pulled away, Truman watched Cooper toddle into the living room where Maya was sprawled on the couch with her phone. The boy moved carefully, mechanically, like someone trying not to disturb the air around him. "Hey, little man," Maya said, putting down her phone. "Want to play with some blocks?" Cooper nodded silently, and for the next hour, they built towers while Truman worked on his laptop at the dining table, occasionally glancing up to check on them. Everything seemed normal, surface normal, at least. But something nagged at him, that old instinct whispering that something was off. Around 4 o'clock, Cooper's shirt rode up as he reached for a block, and Maya froze. Truman saw her expression change, saw the color drain from her face. "Dad." Her voice was carefully controlled, the way he'd taught her to stay calm in emergencies. "Come here." Now. Truman was across the room in 3 strides. Maya had gently lifted Cooper's shirt higher, and what Truman saw made his blood turn to ice. The boy's back was a canvas of cruelty. Fresh bruises in various stages of healing created a mottled pattern across his small ribcage. But worse, much worse, were the deliberate marks. Circular burns, the unmistakable shape of cigarette burns, dotted his shoulder blades. And there, branded into the skin near his spine, was something that made Truman's hands shake with rage, a pattern of scars that formed the letters CB in crude, deliberate strokes. Cooper whimpered softly, and Truman realized his hands were trembling with fury. He forced himself to breathe, to think like the investigator he was, not the man who wanted to put his fist through a wall. "Maya, get my phone. Call 911. Now." He kept his voice steady for Cooper's sake. "Then bring me the camera." While Maya made the call, Truman knelt beside Cooper, meeting the child's frightened eyes. "Hey, buddy. I need to take some pictures of your back, okay? It's not going to hurt. You're safe here. I promise." The way Cooper's face crumpled at the word safe, like it was a concept he barely understood, told Truman everything he needed to know about this child's life. Chapter 2. The Call. The 911 dispatcher was efficient, promising officers and an ambulance within minutes. Truman carefully photographed every mark, every bruise, every scar, his investigator's mind cataloging evidence while his heart broke. Maya sat beside Cooper, talking to him softly about cartoons and toys, anything to keep him calm. "Maya, I need you to call Joanne. Tell her she needs to come home immediately. Don't tell her why. Just say it's urgent regarding Cooper." As Maya made the call, Truman heard the carefully controlled panic in her voice. She was holding it together, but barely. He'd have to talk to her later, help her process what they'd found. For now, they had a child to protect. The police arrived first. Officers Nathaniel Ellis and Diane McConnell, both veterans of the Riverside Oaks PD. Truman recognized Ellis. They'd worked together on a case involving corporate espionage last year. Truman, Ellis said, his expression grim after seeing Cooper's back. Jesus Christ. How long has he been here? About 2 hours. His mother, Joanne West, left him with me for the afternoon. I'm guessing she has no idea about this. Or she does, and she's involved, McConnell said sharply, pulling out her radio to call for Child Protective Services. No. Truman's voice was firm. I've known Joanne for 2 years. She works 60-hour weeks to keep that kid fed. She's exhausted, maybe too exhausted to notice, but she's not the one who did this. Then who? Ellis asked. That's what we're going to find out. But look at those scars, CB. Those were made with something hot, deliberately, repeatedly. Someone branded this kid like cattle. The paramedics arrived, and a gentle older woman named Estella Miller began examining Cooper with practiced efficiency. The child barely reacted, his compliance another red flag of systematic abuse. Joanne's car screeched into the driveway 15 minutes later. She burst through the door, her face wild with worry. What's wrong? Is Cooper okay? Maya said. She stopped dead when she saw the police officers, the paramedics, and her son's exposed back. Oh my God! Her legs buckled, and Truman caught her. Oh my God! Oh my God, what happened? Who? Cooper, baby, who hurt you? The raw anguish in her voice confirmed what Truman had suspected. She hadn't known. But her next words changed everything. Carl, she whispered, her face going from pale to crimson with rage. Carl did this. My ex-husband. I knew he was rough with him, but I thought it was just discipline, not. Carl who? Officer McConnell had her notebook out. Carl Buchanan. We've been divorced for 8 months. He has supervised visitation every other weekend at his mother's house. Joanne was shaking now, her hands clenched into fists. That son of a bitch. Those are his initials. He branded my son with his initials. Truman's mind was already working, connecting dots. Supervised visitation meant someone was supposed to be watching. Someone who'd either been complicit or catastrophically negligent. Where does this happen? He asked. The visits. His mother's house. Beryl Buchanan. She lives on Oakmont Street. Joanne's voice broke. She always said I was too soft on Cooper, that boys needed a firm hand. I thought she just meant strict rules, not. Officer Ellis was already on his radio, dispatching units to both addresses. But Truman knew how this would play out. Carl Buchanan would lawyer up, claim the injuries happened under someone else's care. His mother would deny everything. The system would grind slowly while a child molester walked free on bail. Unless someone made sure that didn't happen. Chapter 3. The Investigator's Oath. The next 72 hours were a masterclass in bureaucratic frustration. Carl Buchanan was arrested, made bail within 24 hours thanks to his mother's money. Beryl Buchanan, it turned out, owned 3 rental properties and had the resources to hire one of the best defense attorneys in the state. The lawyer, a shark named Coleman O'Donnell, immediately began crafting a narrative. Cooper's injuries predated the most recent visit. There was no proof Carl had inflicted them, and Joanne's parental neglect was the real issue. Truman watched the news coverage with growing fury. O'Donnell was good, spinning the story so that Carl appeared to be a concerned father fighting against a vindictive ex-wife. The media ate it up. Divorced parents fighting over custody made for better ratings than the truth. CPS placed Cooper in protective custody temporarily, which devastated Joanne. Truman found her on her porch that Saturday evening, staring at nothing, looking like she'd aged a decade in 3 days. He's going to get away with it, she said flatly. Carl always gets away with everything. His mother's money, his lawyers, they'll paint me as the bad parent, and he'll get supervised visits again, and he'll hurt Cooper again, and I can't. He's not getting away with anything, Truman said quietly. Joanne looked at him, and something in his expression made her straighten. What are you going to do? What I'm trained to do. Investigate. Find evidence. Make sure the truth comes out. The police are already investigating. I'm better. It wasn't arrogance, just fact. Truman had resources the police didn't. Connections in the private sector, surveillance equipment that skirted legal lines, and most importantly, no obligation to follow police procedures that protected suspects' rights. He started with Carl Buchanan's background. The man was 42, worked as a warehouse supervisor, and had a history of bar fights and domestic disturbance calls, none of which had resulted in serious charges, thanks to his mother's intervention and money. His social media was carefully curated, showing a loving father with his son, all smiles and baseball games. But Truman knew how to dig deeper. He called in a favor from an old Marine buddy, Mickey Meadows, who now worked in digital forensics. I need everything on Carl Buchanan. Financial records, online activity, associates, everything. Legal everything, or everything? Mickey asked. Everything. There's a 2-year-old with cigarette burns and his father's initials carved into his back. I need to bury this bastard. Say no more. Give me 48 hours. Next, Truman visited Beryl Buchanan's house, ostensibly as a concerned neighbor checking on the family during this difficult time. The woman who answered the door was in her late 60s, impeccably dressed, with eyes as cold as January frost. Mr. Pittman, isn't it? She'd clearly done her homework. My son mentioned you're the one who called the police on him. I called the police about child abuse, Truman corrected. Your grandson has cigarette burns on his back. My grandson is clumsy and accident-prone. Carl is a devoted father who's being persecuted by a bitter ex-wife. Her voice was ice. I suggest you stay out of family business before you find yourself facing a lawsuit for slander. Truman smiled, the expression not reaching his eyes. Ma'am, I've faced Taliban fighters and corporate criminals. A lawsuit doesn't scare me. But I'll leave you with this thought. If you're covering for your son, you're complicit. And I promise you, the truth will come out. As he walked away, he mentally noted the security cameras on her property, the layout of the house visible through the windows, and the dog, a German shepherd, in the backyard. All useful information. Back home, Maya was waiting. Dad, I can't stop thinking about Cooper. Those marks, someone hurt him on purpose, over and over, and her voice cracked. Truman pulled his daughter into a hug. I know, kiddo, and I'm going to make sure it never happens again. How? That lawyer is already saying Mom, Joanne, is the one who should lose custody. Because the lawyer is working with incomplete information. By the time I'm done, he'll have all the information he needs. Trust me. That night, Truman couldn't sleep. He stood in his home office, looking at the evidence photos he'd been permitted to copy, studying Carl Buchanan's smirking mugshot. The man showed no remorse, no shame, just arrogance. Carl Buchanan thought he was untouchable. His mother's money, his lawyer's skill, and the system's slowness would protect him. He probably thought he'd be back to his supervised visits within weeks, back to terrorizing a helpless child while his mother looked the other way. Truman had spent 15 years in the Marines learning how to neutralize threats. Another 15 years as an investigator learning how to dismantle criminals' lives with evidence and strategy. Carl Buchanan was about to discover what happened when those two skill sets merged with personal motivation. This wasn't just about justice anymore. This was about ensuring a monster never hurt another child again. And Truman Pittman was very, very good at his job. Chapter 4, The Web Titans. Mickey Meadows delivered on Monday morning, and what he found was a gold mine. Carl Buchanan wasn't just an abusive father. He was part of something worse. Your boy Carl has some interesting connections, Mickey said, spreading printouts across Truman's kitchen table while Maya was at school. 3 months ago, he started communicating with a guy named Daryl Clark on an encrypted messaging app. Clark's got 2 prior convictions for child exploitation, served 8 years, currently on probation. Truman's blood ran cold. He's not just abusing his own kid. Gets worse. I found deleted photos on Carl's cloud account. He thought he'd wiped them, but nothing's ever really deleted. There are images of Cooper and 2 other children I don't recognize, all showing injuries. He's been documenting his abuse like it's a trophy collection. Can we use these in court? Mickey grimaced. That's the problem. How I obtain them? Let's just say it wouldn't pass legal muster. The cops can't touch it. But you can leak it to the right people, create pressure, make Carl panic. Scared people make mistakes. Truman studied the evidence, his mind working. Carl had been careful to avoid leaving direct evidence at his own home. The abuse happened at his mother's house during those supervised visits. Beryl was the key. She'd enabled everything, provided the location, probably participated in the cover-up. He needed to get inside that house, find physical evidence the police could legally discover. But how? The answer came from an unexpected source, Joanne, who stopped by that evening looking more determined than devastated. I remembered something, she said. About 6 months ago, before the divorce was final, Carl had a party at his mother's house. He was drunk, showing off, and he told his friends about this special room in Beryl's basement. He said it was where his father used to take him for real discipline when he was a kid. Everyone laughed like it was a joke, but now, his father abused him, Truman finished. And he's continuing the cycle. A basement room, probably soundproofed, definitely hidden. That's where it happens. I never went down there. Beryl always said the basement was off limits. Old furnace, dangerous stairs, family storage. But if Carl was abused there as a child, and now Joanne's voice broke. We need to search that house. The police need probable cause for a warrant. And right now, Carl's lawyer is blocking everything, claiming Cooper's injuries are unrelated to his client. Then we get them probable cause. Truman looked at her carefully. Joanne, I need to ask you something, and I need you to think very carefully before you answer. How far are you willing to go to protect Cooper? As far as it takes, even if it means bending some rules. Truman, that man burned my baby with cigarettes and carved his initials into his skin like Cooper was property. I'll do whatever it takes. Over the next week, Truman assembled his team. Mickey handled the technical aspects, surveillance equipment, digital trails, forensic analysis. Maya, despite his initial reluctance to involve her, proved surprisingly useful. As a teenager, she could observe Beryl's house while jogging through the neighborhood without raising suspicion. She gets a delivery every Tuesday at 2 p.m., Maya reported. Some medical supply company. The delivery guy always goes around back, and she's gone from the house for about 15 minutes. I think she meets him at the back door because of the dogs. Truman filed that information away. A 15-minute window wasn't much, but it was something. Meanwhile, he set his larger plan in motion. Using one of his burner phones, he created a fake social media profile and joined several online groups he'd identified through Mickey's digging, the same groups where Carl and Daryl Clark communicated. He posed as someone with similar interests, slowly building credibility. It was nauseating work, pretending to be one of these monsters, but Truman had gone undercover before. The goal wasn't to become one of them. It was to gather intelligence. And Carl, arrogant and stupid, was active in these groups under a pseudonym that Mickey had already cracked. Within days, Truman had confirmation. Carl was planning to regain custody of Cooper. His lawyer had filed a motion claiming Joanne was an unfit mother, citing her work hours and failure to notice Cooper's injuries as evidence of neglect. The hearing was set for 3 weeks away. He thinks he's won, Truman told his team. Mickey, Joanne, and surprisingly, Officer Nathaniel Ellis, who'd quietly offered to help, off the books. I could lose my badge for this, Ellis admitted. But I've got kids. If that were my son with those scars, I'd want someone to do what you're doing. Just tell me what you need. I need you to be ready to respond when I give the word. I'm going to give you legal probable cause to search Beryl Buchanan's house, particularly her basement. But you can't ask me how I got the information, and you can't wait for official channels. Can you do that? Ellis nodded. If there's evidence of ongoing child abuse, I can act on an anonymous tip. What are you planning? I'm going to make Carl confess. Not to the police, to his friends. And I'm going to make sure it's recorded in a way that can't be disputed. Chapter 5. The Basement Secrets. The opportunity came on a Wednesday night. Carl had posted in one of the online groups about meeting up at a bar in the city, the Rusty Nail, a dive where nobody asked questions and everyone minded their own business. Truman, using his undercover profile, arranged to be there. He wore a wire, not a police-grade device, but something from Mickey's collection of private investigation tools. He also wore a hidden camera in his glasses. Again, not admissible in court, but it didn't need to be. He just needed Carl to talk. Carl was already drunk when Truman arrived, holding court with 3 other men, including Daryl Clark. Truman bought around, insinuated himself into the conversation, and waited. You hear about this guy in Riverside Oaks? One of the men said. Cops tried to pin some bullshit on him about his kid. His ex-wife's trying to screw him over in the divorce. That's me, Carl slurred, raising his glass. Vindictive bitch called CPS because I disciplined my boy. He's 2. Acts like a little shit sometimes. You gotta teach them respect. Truman forced himself to laugh along. Right? Society's too soft now. What did you do, spank him? Better than that, Carl said, leaning in conspiratorially. The alcohol had loosened his tongue exactly as Truman had hoped. My old man taught me. You want them to remember, you gotta make it permanent. A few cigarettes, heated metal, they learn real quick. Truman's hand tightened around his beer bottle, but he kept his expression neutral. Smart. But doesn't that leave marks? So what? Kid's clumsy, falls down, accidents happen. And my mother backs me up. She watched me do it, knows the kid deserved it. Cops can't prove shit. There it was. A confession and confirmation of Beryl's complicity, all recorded. But Truman needed more. He needed the basement. Where do you do it? He asked casually. Can't be at your place. My mom's house. She's got this room in the basement, soundproofed and everything. My dad used to take me there, taught me discipline the same way. It's like a family tradition, you know? Carl laughed, the sound making Truman's skin crawl. Soundproofed basement room. Truman repeated. Smart. Daryl Clark grinned. Carl's got it made. Mother who supports him, lawyer who's getting his kid back, and once he has custody again. I'm gonna teach that boy to respect his father, Carl finished. And no one's gonna stop me. Truman excused himself to the bathroom, where he immediately texted Mickey. Got it. Full confession. Basement confirmed. Send to Ellis now. 20 minutes later, as Carl continued drinking and bragging, Truman slipped out of the bar. He had what he needed, but this was only phase 1. Phase 2 required getting inside Beryl's house, which meant the Tuesday delivery window. Truman spent the weekend preparing, studying the house's layout from county records, planning his approach. He would have exactly 15 minutes to get in, locate the basement room, photograph everything, and get out. On Tuesday at 1:45 p.m., Truman was in position 2 blocks away. Maya was jogging past the house, her phone ready to text him the moment Beryl left to meet the delivery truck. At 2:01 p.m., the text came. She's moving to the back. Truman was already moving. He'd worn utility worker clothes, nondescript blue coveralls, and a clipboard that made him invisible in suburban America. He approached the house from the side yard, moving quickly but not running. Running drew attention. The side door to the basement was locked, but Truman had learned lockpicking in the Marines. 15 seconds later, he was inside, his penlight cutting through the darkness. The basement was finished, divided into sections by drywall. Most of it was ordinary, storage boxes, old furniture, a wine rack. But in the back corner, hidden behind what looked like a false wall panel, Truman found it. The room was approximately 10 by 12 feet, with soundproofing foam on the walls. There was a metal table bolted to the floor, restraints attached to its legs. On a shelf, cigarettes, a lighter, and a set of metal tools including branding irons with various initials. CB. Other initials Truman didn't recognize, suggesting other victims. He photographed everything, his military training, keeping his hands steady despite the rage coursing through him. This was a torture chamber, maintained and used for decades. First on Carl, now on Carl's son, and God knew who else. 10 minutes had passed. He needed to move. He'd just pocketed his camera when he heard footsteps overhead. Beryl had returned early. Truman moved silently to the basement exit, his heart pounding. If she found him, everything was blown. He'd be arrested for breaking and entering, and his evidence would be inadmissible. The side door was 15 feet away. He could hear Beryl on the main floor, talking to someone on the phone. He eased the basement door open, wincing at the slight creak, and slipped out into the afternoon sun. He was 2 houses away, walking normally with his clipboard, when he heard Beryl's voice. Who left the basement door unlocked? Carl, did you? But Truman was already gone, and she'd never seen him. Chapter 6. The Trap Springs. Officer Nathaniel Ellis received Truman's anonymous package that evening, a USB drive containing the audio recording of Carl's confession and detailed photographs of Beryl Buchanan's basement torture chamber. The photographs couldn't be used as official evidence since they were obtained illegally, but they gave Ellis exactly what he needed: probable cause. Anonymous tip about child abuse material and a torture chamber. Ellis explained to his sergeant, I've got reasonable suspicion to believe there's immediate danger to a child. I need a warrant, and I need it now. The warrant was approved within 2 hours. By 10 p.m., 6 police officers, 2 CPS workers, and a forensics team descended on Beryl Buchanan's house. What they found in the basement matched Truman's photos exactly. But they also found something he'd missed: a locked file cabinet containing medical records, photographs and detailed notes documenting abuse going back 30 years to when Carl himself was a child. Beryl hadn't just enabled her son's abuse. She'd documented her husband's abuse of Carl, continuing the pattern. Carl was arrested at his apartment at midnight. His mother was arrested an hour later. Coleman O'Donnell, their expensive lawyer, arrived at the station by 2 a.m., but for once, his silver tongue couldn't spin this. The evidence was overwhelming. Truman watched the news the next morning with grim satisfaction. The story had broken. Generational abuse ring exposed in Riverside Oaks. Mother and son arrested after police discover basement torture chamber. Joanne called him, crying. They found enough evidence to charge them both with multiple counts of child abuse, torture, and child endangerment. Carl's not getting bail this time. Neither is Beryl. Good, Truman said simply. But it wasn't over. Coleman O'Donnell was already crafting a defense strategy, claiming Carl was a victim of childhood abuse himself, that his actions were the result of trauma, that he deserved treatment rather than prison. The lawyer was good, and he knew how to play on jury sympathy. Truman knew this kind of defense sometimes worked. He'd seen it before. Abusers claiming their own victimhood as justification, getting reduced sentences, serving minimal time, then returning to their patterns. That couldn't happen. Not this time. Which brought him to phase 3 of his plan. The phase he hadn't told anyone about, not even Mickey or Ellis. This was the part that crossed legal lines, the part that would ensure Carl Buchanan never hurt another child again. Truman had learned a lot during his investigation, including Carl's patterns, his routines, and his associates. He'd also learned something crucial. Carl had a brother, Valentine Farley, who'd taken their mother's maiden name years ago to distance himself from the family. Valentine was clean, had testified against his mother and brother once the abuse came to light, and was cooperating with prosecutors. Through Valentine, Truman learned that Carl had made threats, both in jail and through intermediaries, promising revenge against Joanne, promising to get custody of Cooper eventually, promising to make everyone pay. The man had learned nothing, felt no remorse, and O'Donnell was already arranging psychiatric evaluations designed to paint Carl as mentally ill rather than maliciously evil. Truman couldn't let that happen. He spent the next week gathering additional evidence. Evidence of Carl's online activities, his connections to other child abusers, his plans. Mickey had cracked Carl's encrypted communications, revealing a network of predators who shared photos, techniques, and victims. This evidence, Truman delivered directly to the FBI's Child Exploitation Task Force. Not anonymously this time. He walked into their office, identified himself, and laid everything out. I obtained some of this through methods that won't hold up in court, he admitted to Special Agent Diane McConnell, no relation to the local officer. But it'll give you enough to get legal warrants, legal surveillance, and legal evidence against not just Carl Buchanan, but a network of abusers. The FBI agent studied him carefully. You know this could implicate you in illegal surveillance. I know. But I also know you care more about stopping child abusers than prosecuting a private investigator who bent some rules. Am I wrong? She smiled grimly. You're not wrong. We'll take it from here. Chapter 7. Checkmate. The FBI's involvement changed everything. What had started as a local case exploded into a federal investigation. Carl's online network led to 17 other arrests across 6 states. Beryl's documentation implicated 3 other families in similar abuse patterns. The case became national news. Coleman O'Donnell's defense strategy crumbled. You couldn't claim your client was a traumatized victim when he was actively participating in an organized child exploitation network. The psychiatric evaluation O'Donnell had arranged backfired spectacularly when the psychiatrist testified that Carl showed clear signs of antisocial personality disorder and posed a continued threat to children. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Truman attended every day, sitting behind Joanne in the courtroom, watching Carl's arrogance slowly transform into panic as witness after witness testified against him. Valentine Farley's testimony was particularly damning. He described growing up in that house, being taken to that basement room, watching his older brother Carl learn to enjoy inflicting pain. Our father abused us both, Valentine said quietly. But I learned to hate what was done to me. Carl learned to love it. There's a difference. When the prosecution entered the photographs of Cooper's injuries into evidence, several jurors wept. When they played the audio of Carl bragging about the abuse, legally obtained through the FBI's subsequent surveillance after Truman's tip. Carl's lawyer objected strenuously, but the judge allowed it. The defendant's own words are always admissible, she ruled. Carl took the stand in his own defense, against his lawyer's advice, and it destroyed him. Under cross-examination, he claimed Cooper was disciplined, not abused, that the burns and scars were teaching moments, that children needed to learn respect. The prosecutor, a razor-sharp woman named Wanda Salas, eviscerated him. Mr. Buchanan, you branded a 2-year-old child with your initials. You burned him with cigarettes. You restrained him to a table in a soundproofed room. What exactly were you teaching him? To be tough. To be a man. To be terrified? To be scarred for life? To possibly die if the infections from those wounds had spread? Carl had no answer. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. They found Carl guilty on all counts: aggravated child abuse, torture, child endangerment, and possession of child exploitation material. Federal charges were pending for his role in the online network. Beryl's trial followed, and she showed even less remorse than her son. She claimed she was protecting family tradition, that modern society had become too soft, that children needed strict discipline. Her own documentation proved her guilt: 30 years of abuse, meticulously recorded, including photos of Carl as a child bearing the same marks now found on his son. Both were sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The judge's words echoed in the courtroom. You treated children, your own child, as property to be marked and damaged. You created a torture chamber in your home and used it for decades. This court finds you irredeemable and a permanent danger to any child who might come into your orbit. You will spend the rest of your natural lives in prison. As the bailiffs led Carl away, he looked directly at Truman, recognition finally dawning. He'd seen Truman in the courtroom every day but hadn't made the connection until now. The neighbor who'd found the marks, the man who'd unraveled everything. Carl's face twisted with rage, and he lunged against his restraints, shouting threats that the bailiffs quickly silenced. But Truman just stared back, his expression calm, unmoved. Carl Buchanan had been neutralized. Permanently. Chapter 8. Aftermath. The immediate danger was over, but the healing process was just beginning. Cooper was placed in Joanne's custody with the support of intensive therapy and CPS oversight. Not punitive oversight, but supportive, helping both mother and child recover from trauma. Truman visited them regularly. Cooper, with the resilience of childhood, was slowly beginning to smile again, to play without that careful, fearful precision. The physical scars would remain, but the therapists were optimistic about his long-term recovery. He talks about you as Mr. Safe, Joanne told Truman one afternoon. He says you're the man who made the bad people go away. Truman felt something crack in his chest: grief, relief, pride, all mixed together. I'm glad he feels safe. More than that, he's starting to believe he deserves to be safe. That's everything. Maya, who'd accompanied him on the visit, was playing with Cooper in the yard. Truman watched his daughter laugh as the toddler chased Bubbles, seeing her begin to heal too. She'd been carrying the weight of discovery, the trauma of seeing those injuries, the nightmares of wondering if they'd acted fast enough. She's strong, Joanne observed. Like her father. She's stronger, Truman corrected. She had the courage to call me over, to not look away. A lot of people would have looked away. The FBI continued their investigation into the network Carl had been part of, and Truman cooperated fully, providing additional intelligence when asked. Special Agent McConnell had kept her word. No charges were filed against him for his initial illegal surveillance. Parallel construction, she'd explained. We used your tip to get legal warrants, and everything we found is admissible. Your role stays out of official reports. Mickey Meadows had proven invaluable throughout the investigation, and Truman made sure he was compensated, both financially and with a recommendation to several law enforcement agencies looking for digital forensics consultants. You helped put away 17 child abusers, Truman told him. That's a career highlight. Officer Nathaniel Ellis received a commendation for his rapid response and thorough investigation. He and Truman met for coffee occasionally, two men who'd bent rules to protect a child and found they could live with the moral ambiguity of their choices. You ever regret it? Ellis asked one day. The breaking and entering, the illegal surveillance? Not for a second, Truman replied. I've got a lot of regrets in my life. But saving Cooper isn't one of them. What about you? Same. Though I'm glad I didn't know some of the details until after. Plausible deniability kept my badge clean. Ellis grinned. You're a hell of an investigator, Truman. If you ever want to consult officially, let me know. But Truman's most unexpected alliance came from Valentine Farley. The man reached out after the trials concluded, wanting to meet the person who'd stopped his brother. They met at a quiet diner, two men connected by tragedy and justice. Valentine was 45, a high school teacher, childless by choice. I never wanted kids, he admitted. I was terrified I'd be like my father, like Carl. Terrified the violence was genetic. It's not, Truman said firmly. You broke the cycle. Carl chose to continue it. That's the difference. I should have done more. Reported him, stopped him. You testified. You helped put him away. That takes courage. Valentine nodded slowly. Thank you. For what you did. For Cooper, for all the kids in that network you helped expose. My brother was a monster, and my mother enabled him, and they both deserved exactly what they got. After Valentine left, Truman sat alone with his coffee, reflecting on the past months. He'd crossed lines, broken laws, risked his career and his freedom. But Cooper was safe. 17 other children were safe. A network of predators had been dismantled. Sometimes justice didn't come through the system. Sometimes it came through people willing to act when action was needed, willing to fight when fighting was necessary. He'd been trained as a soldier, learned to be an investigator, but ultimately, he was just a man who'd seen a child in danger and refused to look away. In his book, that made him successful at the only job that really mattered, protecting the innocent. Chapter 9. The Long Shadow. 6 months after the trials, Truman received a call from the FBI. Special Agent McConnell had a proposition. We're forming a task force, she explained. Former military, former law enforcement, private investigators, people with specific skill sets for investigating cases like the Buchanan Network. Off-the-books consultants who can operate in gray areas when needed. Interested, Truman considered it. The work would be dangerous, morally complex, and would take him away from Maya regularly. But it would also mean protecting more children, stopping more predators, using his skills for maximum impact. I'll need to discuss it with my daughter, he said. Maya, now 17 and applying to colleges with majors in criminal justice and psychology, surprised him with her response. Dad, you saved Cooper. You saved a bunch of other kids too. If you can do more of that, you should. It'll mean I'm gone sometimes. Travel, investigations. I'm almost 18. I can handle it. Besides, someone's got to do this work, and you're really good at it. She smiled. Plus, it's pretty cool having a dad who's basically a real-life superhero. I'm not a superhero. I'm just a guy who sees something wrong and fixes it. Yeah, Dad, that's kind of the definition. Truman joined the task force, codenamed Operation Sentinel. Over the next year, he participated in 7 major investigations, helping dismantle child exploitation networks in 4 countries. He operated in shadows, gathering intelligence that official channels couldn't touch, providing law enforcement with the leverage they needed to act. He was good at it, better than good. His military training, investigative experience, and personal motivation made him one of the task force's most effective operators. But he never forgot why he did it, never lost sight of the faces behind the case numbers. Cooper, now 3.5, was thriving. The scars on his back would never fully fade, but they were fading from his mind. He had nightmares sometimes, but they were growing less frequent. He laughed more, played more, trusted more. Joanne had become a fierce advocate for child abuse prevention, working with local organizations and speaking publicly about her experience. I missed the signs, she told audiences. I was exhausted, overwhelmed, and I trusted the wrong people. But I'm here to tell you that if you suspect abuse, act. Call someone. Do something. Don't wait. Truman attended one of her speaking events, sitting in the back of the community center. Afterward, she found him. You know, I never properly thanked you, she said. You didn't have to do any of it. The investigation, the risk, the obsession with making sure Carl and Beryl got what they deserved. You could have just called the police and walked away. That was never an option, Truman replied. Not after I saw what they did to Cooper. Still, you put your life on hold, maybe risked your career, definitely broke some laws. What? Truman thought about his answer carefully. When my wife was dying, I felt helpless. Couldn't fix it, couldn't fight it, couldn't protect her from cancer. It was the worst feeling in my life, watching someone I loved suffer and being unable to stop it. When I saw Cooper's back, saw those marks, I realized I could stop this. I could fight this enemy. So I did. Joanne hugged him, tears streaming down her face. You gave me my son back. You gave him a future. How do I ever repay that? You don't. You just keep being his mother, keep fighting for other kids, keep speaking out. That's the payment. As Truman drove home that evening, his phone rang. Maya, calling from her college dorm. Dad, you on another case? Just finished one. What? Because I need you to be in town next weekend. I'm bringing someone home for you to meet. Someone. His name is Jonathan Perez. He's in my criminology class. He's nice, Dad, but you're going to do that thing where you investigate his entire life history before dinner, aren't you? Truman laughed. Probably. It's what I do. Just try to be normal dad intimidating, not federal task force intimidating, okay? No promises. After they hung up, Truman sat in his car for a moment, looking at his house, the quiet suburban home in Riverside Oaks where this all began. So much had changed in less than a year. Cooper was safe. Carl and Beryl were in prison. A network of predators had been dismantled, and he'd found a new purpose, a new mission that used his skills for something that mattered. But the work was never done. There would always be another case, another child in danger, another monster to stop. The shadow of abuse was long and dark, stretching across generations, across families, across communities. Someone had to stand in that shadow and fight back. Someone had to be willing to cross lines, take risks, and do whatever it took to protect the innocent. Truman Pittman had discovered he was that someone, and he was just getting started. Epilogue. 10 years later, Cooper was 13, healthy, and thriving. He'd been in therapy since that day Truman discovered his injuries, and while he still bore physical scars, the emotional ones had healed remarkably well. He was on the soccer team, made honor roll regularly, and showed no signs of replicating his father's violence. Joanne had remarried, a kind man named Logan McKnight who'd adopted Cooper and treated him as his own. They'd had another child together, a daughter who Cooper doted on protectively. Carl Buchanan died in prison, shanked in the yard by another inmate after word got out about his crimes. Prison justice was harsh for child abusers. No one mourned him. Beryl Buchanan was still alive, serving her life sentence in a maximum security facility. She'd never expressed remorse, never acknowledged the horror she'd enabled. She'd simply grown old behind bars, forgotten by everyone except the prosecutors who occasionally cited her case in training materials as an example of generational abuse. Maya Pittman had graduated with honors, earned her master's in criminal psychology, and now worked as a forensic psychologist for the FBI, often consulting with her father's task force. Jonathan Perez had become her husband, a fellow FBI agent who understood the demands of the work. And Truman, now 52, graying at the temples but still fit and sharp, continued his work with Operation Sentinel. He'd helped dismantle over 40 child exploitation networks, rescued countless children, and sent hundreds of predators to prison. He kept a photo on his desk, Cooper at age 2, smiling in his mother's arms, taken before the abuse began. It reminded him why he did this work, why he woke up every day ready to dive into darkness to pull children into light. Because somewhere right now, another child was being hurt. Another monster was hiding behind respectability. Another family was suffering in silence. And Truman Pittman, former Marine, former investigator, current guardian in the shadows, would find them. He always did. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.